Welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, in bed, on the couch, winding down from a long day, this is your time. Time to let go of the noise. Time to slow down. Time to just be. Tonight, we're going to explore something that might be one of the most quietly powerful skills you'll ever learn. We're going to talk about acceptance. Not giving up, not giving in, not pretending everything is fine. Real acceptance, the kind that brings peace. So go ahead and get comfortable. Let your body sink in. Take a slow breath in through your nose and let it out gently through your mouth. There's nothing you need to do right now, nowhere you need to be. You can just listen and let these ideas drift in as you begin to relax. Let's start with what acceptance actually means. You've probably heard the word before. Maybe someone told you to just accept it, or to accept things you can't change. But what does that actually feel like? Here's a definition I'd like you to sit with tonight. Acceptance is the ability to clearly see a situation and be at peace with it. Not just understand it, not just tolerate it, but be truly at peace with it. That word, peace, is important because acceptance isn't just a thought. It's a feeling, a quiet, steady feeling, like putting down something heavy you didn't even realize you were carrying. When you are in a state of acceptance, there's an absence of distress, no anger pulling at you, no sadness weighing you down, no urge to go back and change what happened. Just a kind of ease, a neutral, open feeling, maybe with a small hint of hope or even wonder. Some people describe it as being in the moment, and that's exactly right. When you stop fighting what is and just let yourself be present with it, peace has a way of rising up naturally, like a cork released from underwater. That's the feeling we're looking for tonight. Now, here's something worth understanding about when acceptance tends to show up in our lives. Acceptance almost always happens in the context of loss. And I want to say clearly, loss doesn't have to mean something big and devastating. Loss is anything that didn't go the way you expected or hoped. Not getting a promotion, a friendship that drifted, a plan that fell through, a relationship that ended, your health changing, a dream that didn't come true, even small things, the weather not cooperating, a dinner reservation falling through. Every single one of those is a loss, and every single one puts us somewhere on the path toward acceptance or away from it. Back in 1969, a psychiatrist named Elisabeth Kübler Ross described 5 stages people move through after any kind of loss. You may have heard of them: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. She was careful to point out that people don't always move through these stages in neat order. You might feel angry first, then numb, then find a moment of peace, only to feel angry again later. That's completely normal. That's human. What matters most is this: acceptance is something you can move toward. It's a destination you can reach, even if the path isn't always straight. And the more you practice, the easier the journey becomes. Before we talk about the tools that help you reach acceptance, let's gently look at the things that can slow you down. This isn't about judging yourself. It's just about awareness. And awareness is where all change begins. Take a slow breath. The first thing that gets in the way is obsessive thinking. This includes worry, rumination, and perfectionism. That feeling of never quite being good enough, no matter how much you've done. When the bar keeps moving, when you reach one goal only to immediately feel like it's not enough, that's when thinking becomes obsessive. That's when stress takes over. Here's the truth: obsessive thinking is the opposite of acceptance. You can't be at peace with what is if your mind is endlessly chasing what should be. When you notice yourself looping on the same worry, just notice it. That small moment of, "Oh, there I go again," is the first step toward letting it go. The second thing that slows us down is lying to yourself or others. This isn't about big deceptions. It's about the small ways we sometimes avoid the truth because the truth feels uncomfortable. Maybe we avoid taking responsibility for something. Maybe we dismiss feedback that's hard to hear. Lying, even gently, even to ourselves, blocks acceptance because you can't be at peace with a reality you're refusing to fully see. Honesty takes courage, but it's the doorway to peace. And the third barrier is expecting things to stay the same. Change is uncomfortable, it interrupts us, and so, almost without realizing it, most of us quietly hope things will stay as they are. But everything changes, always. Your health, your relationships, your circumstances. When you can gently increase your awareness of this truth, when you start to expect change rather than be surprised by it, you'll find that acceptance comes much more naturally. Life is always in motion, and there is a kind of peace in learning to move with it. Now, let's turn to the good part. The tools, the practices, the gentle steps that lead you home to peace. As you listen, let your muscles soften. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. The first step is to identify any fear that is connected to what you're having trouble accepting. Here is something I've observed over many years of working with people through loss and challenge. Underneath almost every source of pain, there is a fear, not just sadness, not just grief, but a specific fear. And it's usually the fear, not the loss itself, that keeps us stuck. Lose a job, and underneath the sadness is often the fear of not finding another one. Lose a relationship, and beneath the heartbreak is often the fear of being alone. Face a health crisis, and underneath the worry is often the fear of losing independence. Fear and acceptance cannot exist together. They're like oil and water. So when you're struggling to accept something, ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? What is the fear that I'm wrestling with? You don't have to fix the fear yet. Just name it. Just look at it. Something gentle happens when you do this. The fear loses a little of its power. That small relief is a sign you're on the right track. Sometimes the first fear you find is what I call an upper-level fear. Like shame, but underneath shame is usually something deeper. The fear of being rejected, the fear of not belonging, the fear of being cast out of the people and places that matter to you. When you find the real fear underneath, you'll feel a small shift, a little loosening in the chest. That's your signal. I want to tell you about someone I'll call Sarah. She was 28, and she had been watching the man she was dating slowly pull away. Fewer texts, fewer plans, more excuses. And then, one afternoon, walking toward his office building, she saw him, hand in hand with someone else. In a flash, she understood. She hadn't just lost his attention. She had been replaced. In the weeks that followed, Sarah moved through waves of anger and sadness. But toward the end of the third week, she did something important. She turned inward and asked herself honestly, what am I actually afraid of? What she found surprised her a little. Underneath the hurt and the anger was a quiet, gnawing fear that she was somehow undesirable, that something was wrong with her, that she might be alone, not just for now, but for a long time, maybe forever. Just naming those fears, just bringing them into the light, began to loosen their hold on her. She hadn't solved anything yet, but she could breathe a little easier, and that was the beginning. Once you've named the fear, the next step is to soften it by gaining some perspective. Perspective is one of the most powerful tools we have as human beings. The same situation can feel terrifying or manageable, devastating or survivable, depending entirely on how we choose to look at it. Perspective is hard to access when emotions are running high. When fight or flight has taken over, it's nearly impossible to see things clearly. So first, let the emotional storm settle. Come back to your thinking self. And then, gently, try to look at the fear from a wider angle. If the fear is that you'll be alone, can you remind yourself of the people who love you, of the relationships you've built and rebuilt over your lifetime? If someone treated you unkindly, can you hold the perspective that their behavior says more about them than it does about you? Perspective doesn't minimize what you're going through. It just gives you a wider view. And a wider view almost always feels steadier. Sarah found her way here too. Once she had named the fear, she started looking for perspective on it. She began to focus on the people in her life who genuinely valued her, who showed up for her, who reached out just to check in. She let herself see, clearly, that she was not alone in the world. She also started to acknowledge something honest about the man who had left her, that someone who couldn't simply tell her the truth about his feelings wasn't really someone who had been a good partner. His inability to be honest said something about him, not about her worth. That shift in perspective didn't erase the hurt, but it gave her somewhere steadier to stand. There's a special kind of perspective shift that deserves its own moment. It's called reframing. To reframe something is to look at it through a different lens, to find an angle that reveals something the old angle couldn't show. You've probably heard the phrase, "When one door closes, another opens." That's a reframe. It doesn't pretend the closed door isn't real. It just invites you to look toward what might be possible now. Some of the most powerful reframes I've ever encountered came from people facing serious loss, illness, disability, the end of something they deeply loved. Time and again, those people described how the loss ultimately brought them clarity or appreciation. They never could have found another way. Maybe the biggest reframe of all. What if loss itself were just part of being alive, not a mistake, not a punishment, but a necessary part of the journey? The loss is the thing that teaches us, the thing that reminds us to appreciate what we have. Without difficulty, there's no growth. Without contrast, there's no gratitude. You don't have to love the hard things, but perhaps you can begin to accept that they belong here too. I want to tell you about a man I'll call Carl. He was 30, and he had been anxious for as long as he could remember. His anxiety lived primarily in his work, a chronic, grinding worry that his performance was never quite good enough. The stress had settled into his body in the form of serious digestive problems. He took medication daily just to manage the symptoms. Part of the work Carl did was learning to stop judging his own performance so harshly, to step back from the relentless scorecard he had been keeping against himself. But the deeper work was learning to reframe what setbacks at work actually meant. For most of his life, a mistake at work meant something was fundamentally wrong with him. With time and practice, Carl began to reframe that. A mistake became a learning opportunity. A setback became an inevitable feature of working in an environment where no one succeeds all the time. He also reframed what a reasonable effort looked like. He had been devoting nearly every waking hour to perfecting his work. He came to see that a balanced effort, something sustainable, was not laziness. It was wisdom. It was, in fact, what health looked like. As Carl made peace with his limitations and his setbacks, something remarkable happened. His anxiety softened, and his physical symptoms, the ones no medication had fully quieted, began to ease as well. The mind and body are not separate. When Carl stopped fighting himself, his whole system began to relax. The fourth step is what I call shifting your association. And it's one I want you to feel, not just understand. Our brains are wired to remember emotional experiences. Over time, certain losses become linked to automatic reactions. A tightness in the chest, a sinking feeling, an urge to withdraw. These associations live in the oldest, deepest part of your brain, but they can be gently loosened by drawing on your own experience. Think of a time in your past when something hard happened. A loss, a disappointment, something that felt like it might be too much to bear. And then remember, you got through it. You found your footing again. That's not just a memory. That's evidence. Evidence that loss does not mean the end, that you are more resilient than your fear believes you are. When you're facing something hard right now, draw on that evidence. Let your past resilience speak to your present fear. I've gotten through hard things before. This too will pass. Sarah used this tool beautifully. She began to remind herself that this was not the first time she had lost a relationship. There had been others, and after each one, even though it had taken time, she had moved forward. She had formed new connections. She had felt like herself again. She wasn't just telling herself things would be okay. She was remembering, in her body, that they had been okay before. That's a different kind of knowing, and it's much more powerful. By the time Sarah had worked through these steps, naming the fear, gaining perspective, shifting her association, she had moved herself meaningfully along the journey toward acceptance. She stopped plotting ways to get even. She turned her attention toward the things that made her feel good about herself and her life. She got there. Not all at once, but she got there. The steps we've talked about do the deeper work, but there are also gentler tools, ones that give you rest along the journey. Think of them as self-care for the soul. The first is simply distraction, giving yourself a real break from a difficult feeling by turning your attention somewhere else. A walk, a movie, a good book, cooking something you love. This isn't avoiding the work. It's fueling yourself for the work. A mind that never rests can't do its best thinking. The second is meditation and mindfulness. Meditation is the practice of letting all thoughts go, gently, as they arise. Mindfulness is being fully present in whatever you're doing, without letting worry or judgment pull you away. Both of these practices give you direct personal access to the feeling of acceptance, because when your mind is truly still and present, when you're not planning, worrying, or judging, what arises naturally is peace. That is the feeling we've been describing all along. Even just 1 minute of stillness can reconnect you to it. Start there. Let it grow. And finally, don't underestimate the basics. Sleep, movement, water, food that nourishes you. These aren't separate from emotional well-being. They are the foundation of it. When your body is cared for, your mind handles difficulty more gracefully. After you've named the fear, softened it with perspective, reframed it, and drawn on your own resilience, there comes a final step, letting it go, not forcing it away, not pretending it never existed, but gently, with intention, choosing not to give it any more of your energy. You'll know you're close when the fear doesn't rush back right away, when it feels smaller, when thoughts of the loss are manageable rather than overwhelming. At that point, try saying something like, "I wish things were different, but I'm going to make the best of what is," or simply, "I'm at peace with this." When you can say those words, not just speak them, but actually feel them, you've arrived at acceptance. This doesn't mean you'll never think about the loss again. Faint echoes of sadness are healthy. They remind us we cared. They remind us we're human. But the sharp edge is gone. The fear no longer holds you still. There will be moments when you feel like you've reached acceptance, and then something happens, a memory, a hard day, and suddenly the loss feels fresh again. This is not failure. Think of it like learning to walk. Every baby falls down dozens of times before walking steadily. No one thinks less of the baby for falling. Falling is part of learning. Acceptance works the same way. If you're pulled back, start the process again. Name the fear, soothe it, gain perspective, draw on your resilience. Each time you do, the return trip gets shorter. The peace lasts longer. This is what mastering acceptance looks like. Not a single moment of arrival, but a growing ease with the journey itself. Acceptance is, in my view, a kind of superpower. Not because it makes you passive, not because it means you stop trying or caring, but because it frees you from the enormous weight of fighting what is. Sarah found that freedom after heartbreak. Carl found it after years of grinding anxiety. And I want to close with one more story. His name was Frank. Frank was 65 and retired when a degenerative neurological disease began to take things from him. His ability to walk, the use of one of his arms, his capacity for basic self-care. What remained was his mind, his voice, his remarkable intelligence and wisdom, which he brought to a reading group he loved. One of the hardest things about Frank's illness was needing to ask other people for help. He had been deeply independent his whole life. Having to ask someone to help him shower caused him real distress. He spent a long time resisting it. And then one day, something shifted. He began to think about the other kinds of help he had always accepted without difficulty. He hired someone to do his taxes. He had a service take care of his lawn. He never thought twice about those things. What if help with personal care was just another kind of help, literally in an instant, in a single moment of reframing? His distress gave way to acceptance. He went from protesting to being at peace. This is one of the most important things I can tell you about acceptance. It can be instantaneous. A shift in perspective can happen in a breath. Years of resistance can dissolve in a moment when the right frame appears. Frank also teaches us something else. Acceptance doesn't have to be complete to be real. There were other losses he hadn't yet made peace with. The capacity to help people through physical action, which had always been central to how he found meaning. He was still working on that. He was, as he himself understood, a work in progress. And so are all of us. None of the stories are about people who changed dramatically. None of them stopped feeling things. They just stopped spending all their energy fighting reality. And in the space that opened up, peace moved in. That same space is available to you. You don't have to be at peace with everything tonight. That's not the goal. The goal, right now, is simply to remember that peace is possible, that acceptance is a skill, and that you are already on the path. So as you settle into sleep tonight, let yourself rest in what is. Whatever is unresolved can stay unresolved for now. Whatever is uncertain can stay uncertain. You don't need to figure anything out tonight. Just breathe. Feel the weight of your body. the warmth around you, the stillness of this moment. You are safe, you are worthy, and you are doing just fine on this journey. Sleep well,